Again, if you're just coming in, I'm Greg Goodland with the Rio Grande National Forest, and I welcome you to our Forest Specialist series that we do jointly with the San Juan Mountains Association. And we're really excited to have this presentation and good attendance tonight. I'm going to just lollygag for another couple of minutes to ensure the last folks are getting in, and then I'll get us officially started. So again, welcome everybody, and hang out for just a minute. And we're just going to keep chatting. So, Kelly, how's it looking?
I just keep letting people in.
Okay,
They just keep coming. So
I'm glad.
yeah, this is gonna be a fun one.
Yeah, that's the intent. We want to put a lot of information out there, and
Yeah.
there's a lot of folks to accept it. So I think this is a good thing.
Yeah, this will be good.
Again, if you're just coming in now, we'll get started here in just a minute or two. We just want to make sure all the folks that have jumped in the queue are being let in, and they can hear the whole presentation to start, or from the start, I should say.
Yeah.
Give us just a minute, and Kelly's going to let us know when we can go.
I don't. They just keep coming. As soon as I let everybody in, then there's more people in the waiting room.
Okay, fair enough. It's 5:04 on my clock. I'm gonna wait till 5:06, and then we will get officially started, because I want to be as aware of folks' time as we should be. We appreciate y'all coming, and we'll get started here in just a minute and a half. I see some familiar names on my list here, so this is great.
3802.
Long-term attendees and some new folks for sure.
Yeah, there's quite a few. And there's a lot of people I don't know.
That's even better yet. All right.
Yeah.
Well, hey, I got my last minute. Wyatt, you're from Kansas City. What's the farthest somebody's from? If you think you're the farthest, come on and tell me where you're from.
North Central Texas.
Very nice. Oh, Charlie, hey, welcome back. Good to see you again.
Thank you.
Kathy, where are you from?
Uh-oh.
I didn't catch
Blanca,
that.
Colorado.
Blanca. Oh, you're close by. That's pretty far as a crow flies, but I think the guys in Texas and Kansas have you beat. All right. As I said, it's 5:06. Kelly, can I kick this off? Are we still waiting?
Or? Yeah, we're good.
Okay, let's do this then. And hey, again, everybody, hello. Welcome to the Forest Specialist series. My name is Greg Goodland. I'm the Public Affairs Officer for the Rio Grande National Forest, and I'm really excited to have this wonderful presentation tonight. I'm just going to predicate this entire presentation tonight on one foundation, and that is we are here to provide information. We're not here to debate the merits of wolf reintroduction or not. If you want to do that, please contact me. I'll put my name in the chat, my number in the chat, and my email in the chat, and you can talk with me, and I can send you to the appropriate officials, either from the Rio Grande National Forest or Colorado Parks and Wildlife. So as such, let's all be here with an open heart and mind, and I think we'll have a wonderful, wonderful presentation. I know it's coming for us. With that being said, again, welcome. And I'd like to introduce Kelly Defy, our partner from the San Juan Mountains Association. She's on your screen as the VIS coordinator, and she's running the stuff in the background. She's that woman behind the curtain, so to speak, and she's got a couple of things to share for us, or with us, for housekeeping. Welcome, Kelly.
Thank you. As Greg said, I'm from San Juan Mountains Association, and so I'm just doing the background stuff. So, or the housekeeping things. 40-minute presentation, more or less. If you want to ask a question, if you want to ask a question, please raise your hand or put it in the chat. And you can raise your hand. It's down at the bottom of your screen. You've got a bar with different options, and it's in the reactions. You click on that and it'll come up with something for you raise your hand, or you can like, or whatever, things like that. We do ask that everyone stays on mute unless they're asking a question or making a comment, simply because there's just so many of us and it hijacks the presentation a little bit. Let's see, what else do I have? Oh, we have a door prize for everyone tonight. We have 2 door prizes, actually, because there are so many of you tonight. I have a wolf puzzle. I know you can't really see it very well with my blurred background, but it's a wooden wolf puzzle. It's kind of a cute little thing for a kid. And then Greg has a insulated thermos, or insulated tumbler thing. So if you want to be put into the drawing for that, you need to put your name in the chat. If you go down, there's a chat bubble, looks like a little speech bubble. Click on that. You can put your name into the chat for that. And then if you would like to be kept up to date on future Forest Service or Forest Specialist series, then you can put your name in, you can message me personally under the VIS coordinator. If you go to the top of your chat, or at where you chat, if you click on the down arrow next to everyone, you can send it personally to me. And so send me your email address, and I'll get you on our list to send out the updates on what Forest Specialist series we're doing. And with that, I'm just gonna let you turn the time to Jason Remshardt and Jamin Grigg. These guys are our wolf specialists for tonight. Jason is from the Rio Grande National Forest, and Jamin Grigg is from Colorado Parks and Wildlife. Oh, one more thing. We are recording, so everybody needs to just know that this is being recorded, and we will eventually put this on YouTube for people who couldn't make it.
Okay, good to go? All right, thank you, everybody. Again, my name is Jason Remshardt from the Rio Grande National Forest. I work in the Fisheries and Wildlife Program here on the Rio Grande National Forest. I am a biologist, but I will preface a lot of this information that I'm providing myself. I'm not a wolf biologist. I'm not a wolf expert. That's where Colorado Parks and Wildlife comes in. That's where Jamin is going to help us with a lot of this presentation. But I do have a few slides I want to share and go over some information about wolves, and then I'll turn it over to Jamin. So. See that? So yeah,
Seeing it.
good. So yeah, we're here to talk about wolves and the reintroduction process. But a couple of things that I wanted to sort of provide was maybe some of the insights from the forest perspective, and specifically the Rio Grande National Forest here in southwestern Colorado. So again, Jamin's going to go over a lot of the restoration plan and the management plan and the nuts and bolts of how all that stuff is going to work. But I wanted to provide a little bit of insight on the Rio Grande National Forest. And so one of the things he's going to talk about in a little more detail is about the endangered species status and how that sort of fit into this whole process. But for the Rio Grande National Forest, and of course it has impacts, and it has potential impacts on our users, on our wildlife, on our forest as a whole. But in the realm of stuff that I deal with, a lot of the work that we do is for projects. And so when we do projects, you may or may not have heard of a thing called NEPA in the Endangered Species Act. And so from the wildlife perspective, a lot of the stuff that we do on the forest, anywhere from habitat restoration projects to timber sales, to recreation projects, to roads projects, we always have to take into account NEPA, or endangered species, and the effects that these things have on endangered species. And so, like I said, Jamin's going to go into the detail about how this sort of impacted the process. But for the Rio Grande National Forest, it's really interesting that for what we call this non-essential 10J experimental population, it's a lot of letters and words mixed in there, but what that effectively means for us is we consider it a proposed species. So it becomes basically for us a non-issue when it comes to NEPA specifically. It's a really high bar that we would have to reach before it would impact anything that we do on our forest. Like I said, there are other impacts and potential impacts from users and recreational users, and range impacts, and we'll get into some of those, and Jamin will as well later. But I just wanted to sort of throw that out there because that was something that I learned in the process that I wasn't. And it all depends on the federal government agency that you work for on how that sort of determination gets made. And then the other thing I thought I would do is provide a little bit of the biology of the species and try to get some of these basic information out on the things that I found. And again, most of this information, if not all of it, I pulled directly from Colorado Parks and Wildlife's website. And I put it in the chat earlier, but Greg can share it again later as well. And you can find tons of information. There's lots of videos, facts on wolf reintroduction and dealing with wolves and stuff. There's tons of great information in there. And so one of the things that I thought was really interesting as I dug through their website was this wolf sighting form, right? And so one of the things they're going to be looking for, right, is as the wolf reintroduction process gets moving is, hey, they're going to be doing a lot of their own monitoring, but they're going to be relying on people out there if you come across a wolf or what you think is a wolf. And so there's a whole process, and as you dig through the wolf sighting form on their website, they're going to ask you a lot of really specific questions like, what did you see? How big was it? Where exactly were you? What was the animal doing? And so I thought it would be interesting to sort of go through some of that information to sort of think about the things that we might run into. And of course, the biggest question that always comes up is like, well, what did you see, right? Was it a wolf? Was it a coyote? Was it a dog, right? There's a lot of dogs that are in that sort of range. And so, the two of the biggest, the biggest thing that you can tell when you're trying to compare like a gray wolf to a coyote is the size. But of course, coyotes and wolves aren't always hanging out together, of course. But when you're talking about gray wolves, you're talking in that 80 to 100 pound range. And coyotes are, of course, quite a bit smaller. And there are differences, as you can see from these pictures. Gray wolves tend to have a little bit rounder ears. When you go into the size of the coyotes, again, people will look at things like their paw size, right? If you're talking about like something that's 4 inches wide by 5 inches long, of course, that could be a dog. There are dogs that are that size, but once you get into a dog type track that's bigger than 2 or 2.5 inches, into that 4.5 to 5 inch range, then there's at least the likelihood that it could be a gray wolf, right? So, but when you get into that wolf sighting form, if you sort of dig through it, they're going to be asking you a lot of specific questions, and they may even say like, "Hey, can we contact you?" More questions, and of course, like with all this stuff, pictures are almost always the most usable piece of information that you can get, along with the information from the location. So, and I'm sure Jamin can answer more questions if we have them later. So I just throw that out there. And again, like I said, there's tons more information. I put the link here is at the bottom of the screen, but I put it in the chat earlier, so you can go directly to that page. And there's tons and tons of resources on wolf education and the whole process of going through this wolf reintroduction program. And with that, I'm going to quit sharing and then turn it over to Jamin. So was this one?
Thanks, Jason.
Okay. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, thanks. Great introduction, and covered some of the biology there really well. I will share my screen, and then I'll kind of introduce myself, and we'll get started here. Is that working correctly? Everybody see my first slide there?
Looks good on my end.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, thanks everybody. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. As Jason said, I'm Jamin Grigg. I'm the senior wildlife biologist for Colorado Parks and Wildlife's Southwest region. So I'm based out of the regional office in Durango. And the Southwest region for Parks and Wildlife covers the Durango area, Montrose, Gunnison, and the San Luis Valley. So we do, the San Luis Valley is included in the Southwest region for Parks and Wildlife, and I'm the senior wildlife biologist out of this region. So I've been fairly involved with the wolf reintroduction plan. I'm not the wolf reintroduction lead. We actually have a biologist, Eric Odell, who is our wolf reintroduction lead, and I actually stole a lot of this presentation from a presentation that he gave previously, but I'll do my best to cover most of this tonight. We'll leave it pretty informal, so I can answer questions or whatever might come up throughout the presentation. But I just want to give a little bit of background on, obviously everybody who's on this call is well aware that Colorado Parks and Wildlife is going to be reintroducing wolves starting this winter. And I just wanted to give a little bit of background about, how we got to this point and what to expect moving forward. So how is Colorado Parks and Wildlife going to go about the reintroduction of wolves into the state? Where is that going to occur? What's the timeline? And then how will we go about managing wolves moving forward from here? So, so with that, I guess I'll just get started here. So essentially, the Colorado Parks and Wildlife has been mandated with the passage of Proposition 114 to reintroduce wolves west of the Continental Divide in Colorado, beginning in December of 2023, so just next month. And so how this all started was, in the summer of 2019, a pro-wolf reintroduction group started collecting signatures for a ballot initiative. Wolves obviously have a long history in Colorado. They were extirpated from the state, essentially back in the 40s and 50s, 1940s and 50s. And since then, there's been, decades of discussion about reintroducing them, possibly reintroducing them. That has never happened for one reason or another. But in beginning the summer of 2019, a group that was in favor of reintroducing wolves began gathering signatures for a petition to try to get a ballot initiative on the statewide ballot that would essentially direct Parks and Wildlife to reintroduce wolves. So they began gathering signatures in the summer of 2019. You have to gather so many signatures or a certain percentage of the electorate has to sign on to your petition in order for it to make the ballot. So they began gathering signatures. Right about the same time period, we actually had two wolves, a male and a female, naturally migrate into the state. The female wolf, which is pictured in this photo, was a radio-collared wolf that came down from northwest Wyoming, basically from the Grand Tetons area. It had been collared up there, migrated down from there, and arrived in North Park. For those of you who know where North Park is, up around Walden and that area, basically west of Rocky Mountain National Park. She was traveling with a male, so there were once we began getting reports of these wolves and observations of them, we discovered there were two of them. She was traveling with another wolf, and it turned out to be a male-female pair. Then in January 2020, we had another group of wolves naturally migrate into Colorado and show up in Moffett County, up in the far northwest corner of Colorado. This would be up around Dinosaur National Monument, just north of Dinosaur National Monument, or northwest of Craig, Colorado. We believe there were 5 or 6 wolves at one point in this pack. And they set up, they basically set up a territory in the northwest part of the state. And they were there for a period of time, and then they seem to have disbanded. We believe some of these wolves were moving in and out of back and forth between Wyoming and Colorado, and we actually believe that most of this pack or these wolves were killed in Wyoming, were shot legally in Wyoming prior to ever breeding. So this pack in Moffett County no longer seems to exist and has disbanded. And then in October of 2020, wolves are federally delisted from the Endangered Species Act. So again, this is prior to the ballot initiative being voted on. The petitioners at this point have gathered enough signatures to get Proposition 114, the wolf reintroduction ballot initiative, on the statewide ballot, but hasn't been voted on yet. So this potentially could have thrown a little bit of a wrench into any reintroduction plans. The fact that in October of 2020, wolves are delisted from the Endangered Species Act. There was concern about how this would influence things. It turns out it really didn't end up having a whole lot of impact on Colorado's ability to reintroduce wolves or not. So then in November, the next month, November of 2020, the ballot initiative goes up for a statewide vote and narrowly passed by a 51 to 49% margin. So very, very close vote. But in the end, in terms of the passage of the ballot initiative, the only thing that matters is that a majority of the voting population did vote to pass the initiative. Again, by less than 60,000 votes statewide, about a 51 to 49% margin. So the ballot initiative passes by that margin. At that point, it becomes state law, becomes Colorado Revised Statute 33-2-105.8. And this state law essentially directs the Colorado Parks and Wildlife Commission to restore wolves west of the Continental Divide. Directs them to develop methodology for determining when gray wolves are sustaining themselves and have a self-sustaining population within Colorado. Directs us to resolve conflicts with those involved in ranching and farming, so depredation conflicts or potential losses of livestock, that type of thing. And then directs us to take steps necessary to begin the reintroduction of wolves by next month, December of 2023, which is essentially where we're at now. So the ballot initiative passes in November of 2020. At that point in time, it basically kicks into high gear a process involving many of our biologists across the state, many both state and federal employees, having conversations with other states, talking to other states that have done reintroductions of wolves in the past, states who have dealt with managing wolves, specifically talking to a lot of our neighboring states to the north, the Northern Rockies states, about their experiences managing wolves and essentially what to expect. In January, then back into the field. So kind of this whole time we're, as the ballot initiative is being proposed and voted on and passed and all of that, we're still, monitoring this male and female that have showed up naturally in North Park. So in January of 2021, we put a GPS radio collar on the male. So if you remember, the female had been previously collared up in the Tetons, but the male was uncollared. We were able to dart the male out of a helicopter with a tranquilizer dart, get a GPS radio collar on him in January of 2021. And then this pair, male-female pair, successfully bred and had a litter of 6 pups that spring. So at that point, the male-female pair becomes a pack of 8 wolves at that point with 6 pups. And back to the kind of the management process that the agency is going through. Beginning in April of 2021, we initiated kind of a statewide education program. This included a series of videos discussing, the reintroduction logistics, wolf management, what to expect from predator-prey interactions, wolf-prey interactions, as well as what to expect as far as livestock damage and what type of compensation would be offered to landowners and ranchers who experienced losses to their livestock related to wolves. These videos are all still up on our website. So these were virtual presentations that are now up on our website or on our YouTube channel that anybody can go in and watch. We also contracted with a group called the Keystone Policy Center to help us with a series of public meetings that took place all across the state from April 2021 through August of 2022. We had, I believe, somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 public meetings across the state during this time period to basically provide as much information to the public as we could, and then to collect feedback from folks who attended the meetings as well, and basically collect as much public input as we could and start gearing up towards writing the reintroduction plan. CPW also put together during this time period from June 2021 through August of 2022 both a technical working group and a stakeholder advisory group to help make recommendations that went into the wolf reintroduction management plan. The technical working group consisted of wolf management experts from all over the country, people who have as much experience with wolves as anybody does, as well as livestock representatives, some federal representatives, and so on and so forth, but basically a group of experts to help us write the reintroduction management plan. And then the stakeholder advisory group consisted of exactly what it says, a whole bunch of different stakeholders, a representative group of stakeholders from across the state, ranging from wolf advocates to ranchers, hunters, outfitters, kind of the whole gamut of people. And interest groups that would be interested in the reintroduction of wolves. So these two groups were assembled to basically help us draft that reintroduction plan and make recommendations that went in there. Then going back to the field at this same time period, about the same time, we experienced our first livestock depredation from the North Park pack. So again, remember that was a male and female adults that breeded, had 6 pups. They were now at that point a pack of 8, and we experienced our first livestock depredation on some cattle up in as well as I think a working dog, a ranch working dog, in December of 2021 up in the North Park area. So we were then working with those landowners to compensate them for those losses. Then in February 2022, a federal court rules to relist wolves on the Endangered Species Act. So wolves go back on the Federal Endangered Species Act. And at that point in time, it became, as Jason mentioned earlier during his introduction, it became vital for Colorado prior to a reintroduction to obtain what we call a 10J status and have a NEPA analysis performed. And what the 10J does, no reason to go too deep into the details of it, but essentially what 10J does is gives CPW, or gives the state, more management flexibility. So without a 10J ruling, we have very little management flexibility for an endangered species. It's basically a hands-off approach. We can't do much with them. We can't do a whole lot of mitigating for livestock losses or working with landowners. We can't manage for wolves that are causing issues. It's fairly hands-off. So what the 10J does is gives us a little bit of management flexibility to help deal with conflict situations. situations where wolves are depredating on livestock or whatever the conflict might be. So we actually received that 10J status here just, I think, a couple of months ago, maybe not even that long ago. And that will give us that management flexibility that we need once wolves are brought into the state. So then back to the draft planning process for the wolf management plan. This is basically ended up being, a several month process, or even actually more like a 6-month process of drafting the plan. The plan was then approved by the Colorado Parks and Wildlife Commission in May of this year. Don't worry about reading all the text on this slide. I know this is a pretty ugly slide with a lot of text, but I just wanted to give an idea of exactly, and I'll just read it, just to give an idea of exactly what the wolf management plan, what the objectives of the plan are, and what it directs us to do. So under the plan, the wolves are currently state endangered. They will be downlisted from state endangered, which is considered phase 1, to state threatened, which is considered phase 2. When CPW biologists document a minimum wintertime count of 50 or more wolves anywhere in the state for 4 successive years. Wolves will then be delisted from the state threatened and endangered list and classified as delisted non-game species, which is considered phase 3. When a minimum count of at least 150 wolves is observed anywhere in Colorado for 2 successive years, or a minimum count of at least 200 wolves is counted anywhere in Colorado. So that's essentially what the plan states as far as what a wolf population in Colorado might look like, or what a minimum population might look like in terms of recovery. So then the next big question becomes, where are we going to get wolves? Where would they come from? CPW had a lot of conversations with a number of different states throughout the Rocky Mountains related to the potential for trapping wolves from their states and bringing them down here. It was pretty quickly decided that the best place to get wolves would be from the northern Rocky Mountain states. So Wyoming, Montana, Idaho, Oregon, Washington. And we do have currently an agreement in place with Oregon for up to 10 wolves beginning next month. So again, December of 2023, Oregon has agreed to give us up to 10 wolves for this upcoming winter. So so the wolves that will be brought down to Colorado this year, the winter of 23-24, will be coming from Oregon. The way we'll go about doing this is similar to the wolf that we radio collared up in North Park. We contract with a helicopter crew that specializes in this type of thing, but essentially they can dart wolves out of a helicopter. Essentially, you run them into deep snow in a helicopter, run them uphill, slows them down enough that you can get a helicopter down close enough to dart them with a tranquilizer dart. The wolves would then be drugged and tranquilized and loaded up into either an airplane or loaded into a like a horse trailer, essentially, with a in a cage in a horse trailer, and driven back to Colorado at that point. So then once we get wolves, the next question is, where do we release wolves? This is just a habitat suitability map that shows potential wolf habitat across the state, the green being the best wolf habitat across the state. And again, the ballot initiative, or now the state law, mandates us to reintroduce wolves west of the Continental Divide. So it has to be west of the Continental Divide. We also don't want to reintroduce wolves and release them near state lines. So we've placed a 60-mile buffer around state lines because we don't want to release wolves just to have them immediately leave the state. We expect that when we release wolves, they will travel. When wolves were reintroduced into Yellowstone and Idaho, Northern Rocky Mountain states, many of those wolves traveled 50 miles or more within weeks. So we're expecting the same thing here. You know, wolves are curious critters. We're gonna dump them into a new environment. They're gonna go explore. They're gonna go wherever they want to go. And so we're expecting them to travel. So we don't want to release them near a state line where they're just going to immediately leave Colorado. So you can see from the circled areas, these are basically the two areas that have been identified as potential reintroduction areas. One is north of I-70, the other is south of I-70. The reintroductions this first year will be done in the circle north of I-70. So that area that's circled up around Aspen, Vale, Glenwood Springs, that will be where the wolves this winter are released, and then likely that the area in the lower circle would be a potential site for maybe as early as next year. Just talk about a little bit of the monitoring that we will be doing. All of the wolves that will be brought in through the reintroduction process will be wearing radio collars. We will GPS radio collar all of them, be able to track their movements. From there, we'll be getting visuals on them, monitoring them as they move, monitoring them as they begin to establish packs, as they begin to breed. We'll be able to track them. Oftentimes the way we track them is using radio telemetry from a Cessna, such as this, where you can track in on a radio collared wolf, get a visual on them, again, start to get an idea of if they're forming packs, if they're breeding, and monitoring them that way across the state. We'll also have a team of biologists and seasonal biologists that will be out on the ground, getting visuals on packs, monitoring them as they breed, coming up with kind of minimum population estimates across the state as they establish. Most of the monitoring that we will do will be what we call non-invasive monitoring, going out doing track surveys, setting up camera grids where we can get them on motion sensor cameras, and getting visuals on them that way, and potentially some DNA analysis as well through scat samples or hair samples. Try to move some of this quickly here, but so the monitoring goals for Colorado Parks and Wildlife post reintroduction. Again, we'll monitor the population until we get to a point where we feel like, based on what's outlined in that management plan, to be a sustainable wolf population. We'll be monitoring wolf abundance, survival, reproduction, statewide, causes of mortality. So when wolves die, we'll go in and investigate, see why they died or what's going on. Again, monitoring territory establishment. So wolves, as they disperse, will form territories. We'll be monitoring all of that, and then we'll be working with landowners and ranchers on minimizing and mitigating depredation, livestock depredation that takes place across the landscape. We'll also have a couple different research projects ongoing. We're going to be initiating a research project to study wolf predation and wolf predator-prey dynamics. Essentially, what are wolves killing? What are they eating? And how often are they doing that? And that's similar research to what's been done up in the Yellowstone area, but we'd like some of those same answers for wolves in Colorado once they get here. And then we're also going to be monitoring wolf impacts on livestock to see how wolves are influencing cattle activity and stress of livestock when wolves are in the area, weight gain, pregnancy rates, and then how wolves are the same or different than other predators. We'll again be working with landowners a lot on depredation issues, addressing and minimizing and mitigating livestock depredation when it takes place. Landowners or producers will be compensated at a fair market value when depredation is documented. So that'll be a huge part of our management plan, and working with them when they submit claims. We'll also be using tools such as what we call fladry. So fladry is a flagging system seen here with those red flags that you can put around livestock pastures, that's designed to deter wolves. They don't generally like going through the flagging. So that's one system that we can use. We'll have range riders out on the landscape. So just having a human presence out around livestock pastures and livestock operations. And then obviously there's other tools that can be used, such as guard dogs and that type of thing as well. So with that, I think I was running a little bit long there, but I'm happy to answer any questions. And if you would like any more info, Jason already posted one link. There's a lot of information on the CPW website. Please go there. You can also provide input on there. There's a comment form on there, but just go to the CPW website, and there's several different links related to wolf information. The entire wolf management plan is on there if you want to read it, and just a lot of general information. So with that, I will stop sharing, and happy to answer any questions. And I hope, hopefully that was informational. I know I went through some of that pretty quickly. It's a lot of information, but hopefully it just gives some idea of kind of how we got to this point, and where we're headed from here, and kind of what CPW's mandate is at this point, and how we're going to go about that. So,
I had a question. Although I assume they would get to Rio Grande National Forest eventually, I'm a little surprised that wasn't one of the sites they maybe reintroduced. Is it, why that it was considered more unsuitable for the wolves to be reintroduced, for better or worse in this area?
Yeah, that's a good question, and one that comes up a lot, because the Rio Grande and the San Luis Valley in general probably has a lot of good wolf habitat, and it's certainly an area that we would expect wolves to move into probably sooner than later. The reason it wasn't considered as a reintroduction site was primarily because a lot of it is east of the Continental Divide, and the law mandates us to reintroduce them west of the Continental Divide. So that was the primary factor. And then with the 60-mile buffer to a state line as well, that influences some of that as well, just with a lot of the Rio Grande being, obviously close to the New Mexico line. But the primary thing was just that it needed to be west of the Continental Divide.
Jamin, I'm going to jump in. There's a great question in the chat there. It said, will these wolves from Oregon experience an acclimation period in Colorado prior to release here?
That's another great question that comes up a lot. No, they won't. It'll be what we call a hard release. There's been a lot of discussion about that. If we would do what we call a soft release, which is basically bringing them down, then having them in pens, basically trying to acclimate them. There's a lot of issues with trying to do that, and I guess frankly what it came down to was a lot more risk to the wolf to do that. They don't like being in pens. Obviously they're wild animals. They don't want to be in pens. They don't want to be acclimated that way. And then we were also concerned with just making sure we weren't habituating them to any type of human presence or human food or anything like that. So the decision was made that they will be what we call hard releases. So essentially we'll bring them down They will be, when we catch them, they'll be monitored for body condition and body health. We'll only bring animals down if they're in good body condition and good health. And then they'll just be immediately released onto the landscape once we get them here.
Thanks for that. I think I'm going to go with another. Well, there's two more in the chat there that I think we can answer simultaneously. I believe you answered the first one already, but will the wolves be reintroduced to the Rio Grande National Forest? And then the other is kind of in that same realm as, do you expect them to eventually come east to the Continental Divide?
Sure. Yeah, good questions. Certainly the area that's been identified south of I-70 as a potential reintroduction site, beginning likely next winter. It's essentially the area that encompasses the Gunnison Basin. So that's not very far at all from you guys. It's basically just over the hill. And yeah, we expect wolves to go wherever they want very quickly. Again, what they saw in the Yellowstone area and when the reintroductions were done, both there and Idaho, is that the wolves moved dozens of miles, almost overnight. So within a week or two, wolves were 50 miles from the release site. And we fully expect that to happen here. So, if we reintroduce wolves, say, into the Gunnison Basin, they may stay there, or they could be in the Rio Grande, the next day, potentially. So we fully expect them to show up in the Rio Grande, I would say, sooner rather than later, following any reintroductions done south of I-70.
All right, thanks for that, Jamin. And you know what? There's a bunch coming in the chat, but I'm going to go back to online here. We got a couple of hands up. So Kadrin, or however you say your icon there, please come on and ask your question.
Hi, yes. My question really is what is the advantage of bringing the wolves back to Colorado? That's really it.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for the question, Kadrin. Well, it depends on your perspective, right? So,
well, I would just assume that there would be an advantage if you guys are reintroducing them. So that's what I want to know, from your opinion, what that advantage is.
Sure, you bet. Well, the reason Colorado Parks and Wildlife is reintroducing them is because we've been mandated to do so by the state. Some of the pros, the pros for reintroducing wolves are, they're a native species. There's a lot of arguments surrounding that they're a native species. They belong here. They were here historically. They're part of a native ecosystem. So those are a lot of the arguments, I would say. And I don't want to speak for any one group pro or con wolf, but those are some of the arguments that you hear, is that they're a native species and they're part of the native ecosystem here. So.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Hey, Randy, I see your hand is up as well. Please ask your question.
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yep,
yeah. First, kudos. Is it Jamin?
Yeah, Jamin. Yeah.
Jamin. I retired from the Rio Grande Forest as the predecessor to Jamin for 17 years. To Jason for 17 years. So welcome on board. Did you take Scott Waite's place? Is he still there? Could I ask?
I did. Yep. Yeah. So Scott Waite is my predecessor. Scott Waite was the senior biologist here for many years, and
50 years. I don't know.
Long time. Yeah.
Anyway.
Yep. So
I answer a little bit on that last question. Folks can go to your final wolf management plan, and just in the summary pages, very easy to read, and those first few summaries, they list there's several benefits, if you will, or advantages to reintroducing wolves, as well as those that may be negative. So those are always there for folks to read, and I encourage them to do so. I had a couple questions that I'm kind of thinking about, when wolves having the 10J designation is essential, I think, to having success with the reintroduction program and trying to manage the impacts. Kudos to all the committees and everyone, partners, and trying to handle a very complex, not ecological issue, but a very complex social issue. You're going to have, it's going to be some hands full for a while here. But I'm wondering about wolves, because they're not even protected in states like Wyoming, or conversely, the wolves down in New Mexico, which are Mexican wolves, one of which just wandered north of I-40, and I'm not sure what its status is, but on both of those instances, what if those wolves wander into Colorado? They may or may not be collared. I assume all the ones in New Mexico would be. But how are you going to deal with that with the 10J listing and potential, impacts or, impacts on those wolves?
Yeah, great questions, Randy, and good point about the pros and cons of wolf reintroduction. That is outlined in the plan. That's probably a good place to send the folks who are interested in looking at the pros and cons. There it is in the plan. Some of that's on our website as well. So that is a good place to send people. The Mexican wolf question is a good question. So just, I guess, so everybody on here is just for their awareness, Mexican wolves have been reintroduced in Arizona and New Mexico, the Gila National Forest, that area to the south of us. They are currently listed as an endangered species, federally endangered. So, Randy or Jason, please correct me if I misspeak at all here, but they, the 10J status only covers gray wolves. So it only covers the species that we are reintroducing. Mexican wolves would still be covered as federally endangered under the Endangered Species Act. So if Mexican wolves were to naturally migrate north up into Colorado, they would be treated as an endangered species here, and that's how we would manage them. Mexican wolves and gray wolves can hybridize. That's my understanding. And there can be some conflicts there. So it is potentially an issue that we would have to deal with if gray wolves were here and Mexican wolves migrated north into Colorado. But essentially, we don't have, the state of Colorado currently doesn't have any management authority over Mexican wolves.
I think one good point to add, though, is, and you mentioned before to me, is that, the 10J designation is for the entire state of Colorado. And so if there are naturally dispersing wolves that come from the north, once they cross that border into Colorado, there's no distinction between wolves that we've released or Colorado Parks and Wildlife has released and wolves that have naturally migrated in from the north, right? So they would all become sort of the same 10J populations.
Well,
right?
As long as it's, that's right.
Even
As
if
long
they
as
have a collar, and they come from Wyoming or somehow make it across that state.
Yep. So it would cover, the 10J status covers any gray wolf in Colorado. It doesn't matter if it's naturally migrating in or if it's a reintroduced wolf. It's the 10J covers a geographic area rather than reintroduced animals versus naturally migrating wolves. So it would cover any gray wolves, but it does not cover Mexican wolves that could migrate from the south. They would be covered still as an endangered species under the Endangered Species Act. But yeah, any gray wolf in Colorado would be under the 10J designation.
Okay, and I promised I'd go back to the chat, and there's there's numerous in there right now, but a couple of easy ones to answer real quick, Jamin, I think would be, what factors caused the wolves to be delisted in 2020 and then immediately relisted in 2022? I don't think I'd say that's immediate, but maybe in that world it is immediate, huh?
Well, yeah, wolf management is obviously very political. I think everybody on this call is probably very well aware of that, both in Colorado and nationally. It's a very I guess I don't know all of the factors that went into the delisting and the relisting. I guess I would just say that there were a lot of political factors involved in
Yeah,
whether
I think
they
that
were
I
listed
think
or
that's
not.
pretty straight on. Like it all involves judges and lawyers and lawsuits. But I think in this instance, it had something to do with the fact that the delisting decision was thrown out. So it wasn't that it went back through the process and got relisted as an endangered species. It was that the delisting decision was thrown out, if that makes any sense. So it wasn't.
Okay, yeah, that's actually a good distinction there.
But
That makes
that
sense.
happens a lot in the endangered species world, and things get thrown back and forth a lot. But that's
Okay, I'm going to hustle on, but I want to tell folks I'm very interested in hearing a lot more answers. And Kelly, double check that we're not going to get shut off at 6 o'clock. I don't think we are, but I'm planning on staying on. Jamin and Jason, I sure hope you will. And let's keep asking some questions here. Again, I'll call on you if you raise your hand, but I'm going to keep going to the ones in chat. So the next one was the hard release technique used in Yellowstone as well?
The clock.
That's a really good question. I believe Yellowstone, and I'm not a huge expert on how those reintroductions were done. I believe Yellowstone was more of a soft release. Actually, I know Yellowstone was more of a soft release, so they actually kept wolves in pens and were feeding them, I think, for a couple weeks or so before they did the release. The reintroductions in Idaho, I believe, were a hard release, same as what we're looking to do. So I think in Idaho they essentially released the wolves as soon as they got them there. But I believe Yellowstone was more of a soft release, and there's probably debates about which one is best. But essentially, I think after talking to experts across the Rocky Mountains and the Northern Rocky Mountain states and talking about their experiences and what they learned from their reintroductions, it seemed like the consensus was that a hard release was likely, ultimately it came down to what was the best thing for the wolves. And I think the consensus was that a hard release was easier on the wolves than keeping them in a pen for a couple weeks and basically acclimating them before releasing them. So I think the decision was just to get them out on the ground and let them do their thing.
I don't know about you, but that makes sense to me, but I'm not a wolf expert either. So there you go. So I got a direct message to me, and it's actually the same question or fairly the same question I wanted to eat or wanted to eat. So you know what I'm going to ask here. I wanted to ask wolves, once wolves eat livestock, do they prefer to eat wildlife still, or are now they, I like beef.
That's a good question. Yeah, that's a good question. The issue that you can run into, and this is true of most predators, not just wolves, but this can be true of mountain lions, bears, other predators, is that I don't know that they have a preference so much for one or the other, except that if they start to figure out that one is easier than the other, right? So if they start to learn that cows in a pasture are a lot easier to kill than an elk in the forest, they're pretty smart animals, and they start to pick up on that type of thing. So I think that's where you can really run into kind of chronic depredations and chronic issues, and a situation where maybe an individual or a pack might have to be managed, whether it's hazed or lethally removed or whatever. It's really just an issue of if they start to figure out that killing livestock is easier, then they'll take advantage of that. They're pretty smart about that.
Thanks, Jamin. I truly was curious about that. So I'm going to keep going with some questions, but I also want to say at 6:02 on my clock here, I'm going to ask Kelly to come on in here in about 5 minutes, and we'll tell the folks who won the door prizes that they won, and then we can stay on for a while because there are more questions in the chat. So I'm going to answer, or I'm going to have you answer one more question, then we'll have Kelly come back on. Let's see this one here. How was the number of wolf sightings, 50 sightings in 4 successive years, determined to delist the wolves from the endangered to threatened in the state? And I think that was that eventual delisting that you had shown us.
Yeah, good question. Those numbers were essentially recommendations that came from several places. Most of that was developed by the technical working group that I talked about, which is basically a group of wolf management experts from across the Rocky Mountains, and as well as some scientific papers that have evaluated what genetically is needed to maintain a population, and that type of thing. So it came from a lot of, and I wasn't even super involved in some of those details. Again, I'm not the wolf reintroduction lead, and somebody like Eric Odell, who is our wolf reintroduction lead, could answer that question with more detail and better than I can. But it came from the technical working group, basically a bunch of wolf experts who felt like that was a reasonable, at that point, that was a reasonable number of wolves where you could start to delist from state endangered to state threatened to more of just a non-game species that we manage for like anything else.
Yeah, I'm sure that was pretty complex discussion there. So I'm going to ask one more question before I have you come on, Kelly. I really like to know the answer to this one myself. So will the flagging and range riders you mentioned with regard to cattle be on public land or private land?
Good question. Both. Could probably be anywhere in the state where we're either experiencing conflicts or expecting to experience conflicts. And then I think another important point there is that most of that is being paid for by private groups. So I think that's an important point out there is it's not being paid for through tax dollars or even through hunting and fishing license dollars, CPW dollars. Most of that is being funded through private donations, private groups, conservation groups, things like that are funding those efforts. And I think they can probably take place on public or private lands.
Okay, so I think what I'm going to do right now is it is 6:05, and what we'll do is maybe the official wrap up of this of the session, and then we'll stay on for a few more minutes after that and keep answering questions. So on behalf of the Rio Grande National Forest and of course San Juan Mountains Association, our great hosts, I'd like to thank everybody for coming and welcome you to drop off as needed. I know I'm getting hungry, so I would like to invite you all to visit us next month. Our Forest Specialist series is going to be on the December 13th, so it's just a couple weeks away. And it's going to be Sandra Wagner is going to present the Upper Rio Grande fish story. And it's historical fish stories from the Upper Rio Grande, which is the Creed area. So I'm looking forward to that. It should be fun. And she's a wealth of knowledge for that area. So again, that's on December 13th, same time and same Zoom channel. Kelly, take it away. What do we got?
All right. Well, for our 2 door prizes this time around, let's see, Ramona Weber won the wooden puzzle and Shelby Bell won the cup. So if you would both put your email or your phone numbers, addresses, physical addresses, we can send those to you. You send them to me in a personal message if you want to do that. And I think that's really all for closing up the housekeeping. So if we want to go back to questions, Greg, I think we're ready to do that.
That's awesome. I'm ready too. And again, yeah, you guys put your information into the direct message to VIS coordinator and she'll get that worked out. And thanks again, everybody, for coming along. But let's answer some more questions.
Hey,
So
Greg.
next one up. Oh, I'm sorry. Jason, go
Great.
ahead.
So since he talked about it briefly, I know I saw a question that was further down in there, but maybe Jamin, you could talk about the funding of the entire program, sort of where these funds are coming from, because I saw that question a little bit further down. So not just the flagging and the depredation stuff, but maybe the depredation funding and then the actual process itself. How was that funded?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I probably should have studied up on some of that a little bit more before this presentation. It's all, my understanding is that the reintroduction and most of the management going forward will be funded through what we call species conservation funds, a lot of private donations. There's many of you have probably seen there's a license plate. You can get a license plate, state of Colorado license plate that supports wolf reintroduction and management. That's helping to fund all of the costs that are associated with this. So you know, it's not being funded well, and then I guess some of it's I believe funded through the general fund as well, maybe a little bit, but it's somebody, if anybody knows better than me on this question, feel free to help me out here, but I should have studied that better. But it's not coming from hunting and fishing license dollars, which is how most of CPW is funded. I will say that. It's coming from other outside funding sources primarily.
Purposeful pause there for a second. Randy, do you have a answer to that particular question?
No, I don't have an answer to that, but I have another question, but I'll wait, Greg. There's someone else you want to go.
Okay,
There's
cool.
another question.
Yeah, so we did have a question in the box, but I think you already answered it about the Mexican wolves being seen in as close as Taos, New Mexico. So I think you've already answered that, though. Is that not correct?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly possible that a Mexican wolf could wander north across state boundaries. I think we expect that at some point. You know, right now it's a federally endangered species and would be treated that way in Colorado. So there can be some conflicts between gray wolves and Mexican wolves. There can be some hybridization there. But you know, currently the state of Colorado doesn't have any management authority over Mexican wolves.
Yeah, I remember you saying that. So, okay. Question here is CPW going to make an attempt to track the elk and deer numbers even more than you already do if there's an alarming drop in numbers in respect to the wolves? Yeah, what is the plan?
Yes, the short answer is yes. We're going to be pretty intensively monitoring deer and elk populations and moose populations across the state. We've actually already started that. We initiated 3 new elk intensive elk monitoring areas actually last year to start to collect some pre-reintroduction data. But yes, we'll be pretty intensively radio collaring and monitoring ungulate survival, so deer, elk, moose survival, and impacts from both wolf predation and other types of predation, and monitoring, you know, both predation impacts, but you know how there's a lot of ways that wolves can influence deer and elk in terms of how they use the landscape and the habitat types that they use, and so we will have research efforts ongoing for that.
Randy, I might check in with you again here.
Okay. Let me get on here. Yeah. Another question that's more social, I think. And it just happened recently, if I recall, in the news. It's happened certainly up in Yellowstone in regards to the borders, like with Montana. So wolves will cross the border into areas where they're not protected, and there can be pretty much a wholesale slaughter of wolves and a great reduction of really you know, setting back of your objectives. Is there any any kind of work going on with the state of Wyoming, particularly on trying to manage that impact at the state borders, and where basically it's not even a game animal, it's basically, it's not protected in that area, so they basically can shoot all the wolves they want. Is there any work on that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, so yeah, the point that Randy's bringing up is that any wolf that crosses into Wyoming, the southern portion of Wyoming, wolves are designated as basically a varmint species, similar to coyotes. So wolves along the southern border of Wyoming, southern half of Wyoming, can be shot even without a permit. So so that's certainly going to impact Colorado wolves that migrate north into Wyoming. It already has impacted wolves that migrated down here. Both of the packs that have established in Colorado naturally, both of those packs have had individuals killed legally in Wyoming once they cross the border. So it's certainly an issue. You know, it's a good question, Randy. I would say those conversations are ongoing. I'm not, you know, just to be kind of, you know, honest, I'm not sure that Wyoming has a lot of interest in working with us on establishing wolves. You know, they weren't willing to be a part of the reintroduction in terms of providing wolves. They told us that, and I'm not sure that they're real interested in helping us to manage for wolf populations. So I would say those conversations are certainly ongoing, but we also don't have a whole lot of ability to influence Wyoming's position on it.
We could try, but I doubt it'd do any good, right? So, yeah, hey, there's two questions here that I'd like to know, and I want to get to things as I see them. I think very important to our local audience here. One of the questions is, we have a place in northern St. Louis Valley, anything homeowners should do if they see wolves in their yards? And then the next one, I'm going to go ahead and ask that right away, because I'm curious as well. Do you know the male to female ratio for the first release?
Sure. Yeah. I'll start with the second question first. As far as the male female ratio, we will probably try to get something close to a 50-50 ratio, I would expect. I don't know that we have a set number in mind as far as a ratio, but something along the lines of a 50-50 ratio, likely to start with. Females probably being slightly more important. So if we were going to lean more one direction, it would be more towards females, I suspect. And then trying to bring in, you know, healthy animals, relatively young animals that are going to be here for a while and can establish a pack in a territory. So yeah, about a 50-50 split, leaning potentially more towards females. As far as what landowners should do if they see wolves, you know, at least for the foreseeable future, we would ask you to report it. You can report it on our website. I think Jason shared that link, or if you just go to our website and go to the wolf page, you'll find it. But you can report wolves on there. You can make us aware of wolves through that. And then you know, wolves are as are coyotes as well, but wolves are territorial, especially during the breeding season. So their breeding season is January, February, March. They can get territorial and can be protective of those territories with other canines. So, you know, you can take measures to keep your dog inside if you want to, or keep track of your dog during that time period if you feel like there's wolves around. aside from that, wolves aren't probably going to have much of an impact for most landowners unless you have livestock, and then it can be an issue. And certainly, we're working pretty closely with any livestock producers in areas where there's known wolves.
The questions are wonderful, you guys. I appreciate you asking them. I think we're accomplishing what we were sure hoping to, Kelly and I today, and a lot of good engagement on a issue that's pretty darn interesting. So another one here, Patty asked, do the pups stay in the pack or do they disperse as they get older?
Yeah, another good question. The pups generally will stay with the pack for about a year, maybe 18 months, and then they will disperse generally. So you could have a pup that decides to stay with the pack and doesn't disperse, but the majority of pups will disperse at about that 12 to 18 month range.
And then I think I want to add personally to that one, that question then is if they're dispersing, they're pack animals, so they're going to go form their own pack as a brothers and sisters or friends, or do they go find wolves from the other packs?
Right. Yes, they would. That's a good question. That they're going to be largely dispersing, looking for wolves that they're not related to. So they're going to be looking for wolves from other packs or other dispersing wolves, so that they can establish their own mating pair. But essentially, looking for wolves that they're not related to, and they seem to, they seem to have a pretty incredible ability to sense or to know if they're related to another animal or not.
Sorry, I couldn't find my mute button there. Yeah, thanks for that. I was curious. I mean, how do they know that? I guess they know they're brothers and sisters, right? So,
yeah, it's got to be through. I think it's mostly through scent, some sort of scent cues and things. But yeah, they seem to know that. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, Jim, I'm going to ask it. I don't know if you guys are seeing this question. I think it's a fair question, though. So with this issue being so political, is a future ballot measure aimed at reversing the mandate legislation conceivable, or is this a permanent thing at this point? And maybe that even isn't an answerable question with these professionals that we have on.
Yeah, the issue would be, so it's a good question. It's a valid question. You can certainly reverse ballot initiatives. I think it takes and somebody correct me if I'm wrong. I think it takes a higher percentage, so it might be more than just a straight vote. You might have to reach a higher percentage of the vote to reverse a previous ballot initiative, but I'm not an expert on that. But the issue is going to be once wolves are on the ground, we can't just reverse that decision unless we were going to go out and kill every wolf, which politically just isn't a likely thing. So I think at this point, wolves are probably going to be in Colorado, and that would be my expectation.
Certainly makes you go, All right. Hey, I think I skipped over one. Oh, wait a minute. We got, no, they're good. Lots of thanks. And I did skip over one, though. I remember, what was that? Oh, yeah, here it was. How much of what we learned during the Yellowstone reintroduction is guiding and informing Colorado's current efforts? And I guess I'd add to that, I feel like there's probably a lot more than just the Yellowstone reintroductions. We've got Idaho, Montana, Oregon, and Washington that all partook in reintroductions as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, certainly those experiences have heavily influenced our reintroduction plan and will influence our management moving forward. So the technical working group that I talked about that helped develop the plan and was pretty integral in us developing that plan consists of wolf management experts from all of the northern Rocky Mountain states, and from Yellowstone. So a lot of the folks who have more wolf experience than anybody in the country helped to develop this plan, and will certainly be guiding us as we move forward with management.
I would guess so, and I'm sure they studied those other states' operations quite in depth. So, another question that I'm being asked is, do wolves often get hit by cars? Do wolves ever get hit by cars?
Yeah, they certainly can, and we've actually had wolves hit on I-70, that naturally dispersing wolves. So prior to the wolves that we currently have in the state that have migrated in, I'm trying to remember, I want to say maybe 2005, 2006, 2007, somewhere in there, we had at least one wolf that was hit and killed on I-70. There was a naturally migrating wolf that came into the state and was hit on I-70. So it certainly, can be a factor.
Thank you. I was just giving a message that our office shuts the lights off at 6:30, so I'm going to tell everybody I'm going home. So, no, I am going to, Randy, I'll let you ask another question if it's a quick one, and then I am going to shut us down right away at 6:25 or shortly thereafter.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Greg. It is a question for the Rio Grande folks, whoever wants to answer it. Do you anticipate, I don't think personally it's going to take very long for wolves, wherever they are reintroduced on the west side, to at least be over on the Rio Grande side with, what's happening in Oregon and Idaho and California even. So do you anticipate some kind of adjustments in your AMPs, annual operating instructions, or things like that, for requirements for flattery or other things, particularly with some of your allotments at high elevations that may be impacted in the future there? Are you working on that already?
Yeah, I'll take a shot at it. I mean, I know our range staff have been talking with permittees quite a bit, and they've been trying to answer questions about the wolf reintroduction and its potential impacts. And so all I would say is, like, it's something we're considering, and then we would make all this information available to them, and all these different techniques for reducing impacts. As you're probably well aware, Randy, we're in the middle of forest plan monitoring, and one of our big monitoring questions we actually talked about today in a separate meeting is trying to discern the difference between grazing and its grazing resources, and sort of dividing those up between wildlife and cattle. And so it's definitely something we'll be monitoring, and maybe that's a specific question we can ask, is like, are there changes that are being the cattle are being forced to do, and how that sort of impacts the numbers and stuff. And so I would say it's definitely something, we'll be considering.
Well, thanks for that, Jason. I wouldn't have known those conversations are happening. So
yeah. And I did see, so there was one other question, it might have been quite a ways back. It was about virtual fencing. I don't know a whole lot about it, but so virtual fencing is, right, as you can imagine, sort of like putting collars on some cattle. And so then you provide, it's sort of like virtual fencing your yard for your dogs and stuff, but it's of course, on a much broader scale. So you can sort of manage herds and movement around with these virtual fencing efforts. But I know there are some, I think that, as the commenter added, there are some folks in the valley, and some of our permittees are even considering it. But like anything, any new technology comes with a cost, right? And so they're trying to weigh the costs and benefits of that. As far as like how that would interplay or interact with something like this, I have no idea. Maybe Jamin can sort of talk to that, one of those research projects. I know they talked about, like, one of the projects that they're going to be researching is impacts to cattle and livestock. So I'm guessing if they're going to be doing something like that, they probably also have cows radio collared, right? So they're going to be, in order to know, like, what the differences are and how they're sort of changing their movements around, you not only have to know where the wolves are, you have to know where the cattle are. And so I'm guessing there's going to be some some GPS collars on some cattle. I don't know.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. So we're working with producers. So obviously we can't do any of this without cooperation from producers and from the livestock owners, but we have currently several producers, I think up in the North Park area, where the wolves are currently established, that want to work with us, and some of that will involve, it could potentially involve some virtual fencing in the future. I think that has probably some potential, but will certainly involve having transmitters on livestock that monitor stuff like stress rates and heart rates, and can actually monitor percentage of time that they spend feeding versus what we call vigilance, where they're more on alert. So I think a lot of these different studies will be coming in the future, probably. Yeah.
That's great.
I guess I'm still unmuted. Dave, come on and ask your question real quick, and then we're going to shut it down after that.
Yeah, great presentation. I appreciate all the effort everyone's put into it. One other idea that has been floated in some forests, and I don't think it's too widely practiced, is keeping some allotments or some pastures open so that if a permittee's in a situation where he's likely to encounter conflict, like there's a den nearby or wolves have a rendezvous site, that you could shift cows to some unused allotment. Is that something that we could look at for our forest in the future?
Yeah, that's a good question, Dave. I know, and we talked about this in one of our meetings today, but I know when they talk about allotments, right? When they talk about trying to come up with plans for allotments and changing numbers, when we try to do these things, and I mentioned NEPA before, when they try to do these sort of large or NEPA projects, they don't want to look just like at one grazing unit or one particular permittee. They try to do it like on a larger scale for this reason, like so we can have what we call options for seasons, options for days, even options for species, and like if it becomes cattle or if it's sheep. And so like the more options the forest has and the range folks and the permittees have in their back pocket to sort of make adjustments, the better it is. Now, how specifically whether that's one thing that we have on our cattle allotments, I'm not sure. I'm assuming most of the ones that are available are being used, but that's definitely something to consider.
Well, and I guess I'd add, it sounds like it's something that we should at least put into the let's talk about bank and go from there.
Right.
All right. Well, folks, oh, go ahead, Jason.
Sorry, I know you're almost out of time. I was just gonna say, I know those conversations that Dave brought up, I know those types of conversations are already happening up in North Park where those wolves have established. So I would expect similar conversations to start taking place around the state, because especially when there's like a den site, that's something that we're working with producers on to let them know, hey, there's, you're in proximity to a den or whatever, and then we're working with the federal agencies to mitigate that type of stuff.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, fair enough. And I think, again, you mentioned that term statewide. I think there's a lot of statewide issues that are going to be addressed, and we'll be learning from each other as the wolves move around. Well, I guess I'm going to wrap it up at 6:30, and I can't say enough how much I appreciate everybody coming on. Thank you on behalf of, again, the Rio Grande National Forest and the San Juan Mountains Association, our partners that host this event every month. And we'll see you guys at the next one. Again, the next one's December 13th, same place. Adios.